Welcome, everybody, to The Rundown. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Zender, physical therapist and fitness enthusiast. Very excited for our conversation today with my guest. It's going to be a little bit more towards the academic side. He's a PhD researcher and faculty at Concordia University Wisconsin, right here in Mequon, Dr. Kevin Gries. Kevin, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I was admittedly doing a little bit of a background check, not to make sure that you're not a good person, because I know you are, of course, but just in sort of preparation, but not so in depth because I wanted this to be a genuine conversation for me to
Yeah.
learn a little bit more about your background too. PhD is in human bioenergetics,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
Fancy way to say exercise science.
Okay, perfect. We're going to get into that too, which I'm excited about. That's my undergrad is human phys or exercise phys. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about some of these
Yeah.
topics. But for the viewers, for the audience, give us just a little bit of your personal background, like what started, what led you to the path that you're on right now as a researcher and faculty member.
Yeah. Well, I was a runner just about my entire life. Um, and when I went to college, because I was told, in high school you got to go to college, so I wanted to run. So that was step number one. And I just remember being in the auditorium at freshman orientation at Concordia, where I did my undergrad, and just kind of scrolling through the list and just like, oh, exercise physiology, that sounds fun. Sure, it sounds running related. But I had no idea that you could make a career out of it. I actually wanted to my freshman year get into politics. So actually, that was my political science was kind of my first love.
Oh well.
And then I realized that I'm a terrible debater, and I like to take my time thinking. And yeah. Long story short, a career in politics was not for me. So I kind of went back. It's like, well, exercise physiology, yeah. At the end of the day, I just want to learn how I can get faster. And then I just learned like, wow, this stuff's really cool. I wasn't still too concerned about a career at that point. Um, Thought, oh, maybe I'll get in coaching. Did my master's at University of Wisconsin La Crosse in human performance. Um, and then, yeah, I was a grad assistant track and cross country coach at UWL. I had a great time. I loved being on the road on the weekends. And then I remember a conversation I had with my now wife that this is a brutal lifestyle for a family. But I just love science. I just love learning about different things. So I just remember thinking like, okay, I'll go on and get a PhD. And then from there, like, just started loving the field. I mean, what's so cool about research is like, and especially the PhD route, and once you kind of develop your certain skill set in your certain area of research, like you can just dive so deep. So I just got immersed in it. Did my PhD at Ball State Human Performance Lab. Had such a great time there. Um, and yeah, I was looking at a career in research. So I did my after that did my postdoc fellowship at Mayo Clinic. Um, and then I knew ultimately I wanted to get more into academia. And it was, through kind of a little bit roundabout way, it was just very fortunate that Concordia, my alma mater, was hiring. My wife and I, we knew we eventually want to get back in this area. Both of us are from this area. So stars align, and here we are.
Well, speaking for myself, and I think the rest of the faculty, I think we're all very grateful that the stars did align that way, and you're back in
Thank you.
Mequon here. What was that PhD experience like? I mean, were you 24/7 in a lab, or was it a mix of lab and outside of the lab type stuff, or how did the process work?
It was fully immersive. I was in the lab from 7 a.m. to, on average, maybe 6 p.m. Every day, and then well, Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays, most of the time, we're also in the lab from 7 to noon ish. Um, it was a lot of fun because one, you're just surrounded by other nerds, and my PhD advisor, yeah, he's an athlete. The culture in the lab was very athletic based, so we, a lot of my nerd friends were also endurance athletes, so we ran together all the time, and it was just you just totally immerse yourself in the culture. Your coworkers were also your best friends. You're also your training buddies. Um, so just the culture there was so strong that just studying was fun because we'd go out for 1-2 hour runs and just talk about science, talk about training, why we're feeling what we're feeling. It's just a blast to not have anything else to worry about because I wasn't married at the time, didn't have kids at the time. Well, I guess I got married during my PhD. Um, it was in Muncie, Indiana, which I love Muncie, Indiana. Love Indiana. It's not exactly a coastal city. It's not in the mountains.
Right.
So
I've
you
been there
train
before.
and you study. Those
Right.
are the things you do.
Yeah. Well, and obviously it paid off for you too. So I think it's fascinating your love for science. I mean, I love science to an extent, obviously not as much as you did. I went more the clinical route, but
Yeah.
I admire the consistency to get through a PhD program and then also to make research your life. And I'm sort of jumping ahead by asking this, but obviously learning and science is constant. It's going to continue to evolve. We'll never learn everything, but
Mhm.
what in your role as a professor and as your role in a researcher is sort of your end goal? Is there something that you would love to see us accomplish or learn in the exercise science world?
That's a great question because one of my classes I teach is health promotion. And my first year teaching that course, I had the students write, their own bucket list. I was doing a section on aging, and I had them write, their bucket list. And I wrote my bucket list, and I had some professional items on there. And it was just funny because then when I taught it then for the fourth time, so in 4 years, I looked back and I accomplished everything on my bucket list. Did that make me happy? Did that make me satisfied? No, it didn't. I feel equally as hungry as what I did back then, if not more.
Mhm.
So in terms of like what's my ultimate end game, honestly, um, just want to help people. I dabble a little bit in the science policy world. I'm a part of different science policy organizations. I've um, done some contract work with the federal government on some science policy stuff. I think there is, like, especially in the exercise world, it's great because exercise, there's very, very few things I can think of that exercise is bad for. Like, exercise is like the best tool that we have. Um, so I always think when we think of all the problems that we have, especially in the healthcare world, like, well, exercise. They'll, when we look at medications, when we look at healthcare costs, exercise.
Mhm.
Um, so it's hard to objectively define an end game with that, but it's like, oh, if I can just like utilize my research, um, just talk to people, get them engaged with exercise, involved in exercise, hopefully change their lives, then that's it. I don't know how to objectively define that though. I just, like think that someday I'll look back and be like, okay, I moved the needle and made our culture a little healthier.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to summarize what I would hope people appreciate about the research gathering process. And unfortunately, in our culture, the idea of research and science is just sort of this faceless, nameless, enigma or entity. But obviously, there are real people like yourself who are behind gathering information and trying to help people,
Yeah.
right? So we're gathering this information for a purpose, not just for the sake of taking up your time or filling up your schedule.
Mhm.
So do you focus personally? Does your research focus heavily on, or is your personal ambition to focus on one type of pathology or one body system or body structure, or do you just say, hey, I'm going to go wherever my mental drive takes me?
Yeah, absolutely. So during my PhD, we're a very exercise physiology based lab, meaning like very integrative. So we looked a lot of cardiovascular, but our focus was in the muscle. So we would do muscle biopsies before and after exercise. We would look at, we did a lot of aging work, we did a lot of athlete work, and we did a lot of NASA and spaceflight work. So those were our kind of three main areas. And then when I was at Mayo Clinic, we did primarily aging work and obesity work. Um, so now, as an independent investigator, I'm trying to get more. I'm trying to build my research portfolio to roll into aging. I kind of reflect back on, I mentioned earlier that I got into this field because I want to become a better runner. Well, I know the data. I know my elite athletes days are behind me. That window is closed, and we all age.
Right.
So
Unfortunately, yes.
so now I'm starting to get more involved with aging. But one technique that I brought to Concordia, I think makes it very unique, is muscle biopsy. There's a lot that we can learn from by just taking a pencil eraser size piece of muscle before and after exercise. And the amount of things that change with exercise is insane. And that works all the way across different organs. The muscle can, with exercise, can make these proteins, which can go into the blood and go to the brain, go to the liver, go to the heart, all these different tissues. So that's kind of the area that I'm headed towards is how can we utilize exercise to help the aging process with particular focus on skeletal muscle.
Hmm. And you mentioned your connection to policy, correct? I forget the exact term you used. I apologize, but how specifically have you bridged the gap between science and policy, or brought what you've gathered into the lab or what you hope to gather into actual application to society?
Yeah, so I try to have a two-pronged approach there. So through two of my professional organizations, I'm on their science policy committees. And there we talk more about trying to help um, federal agencies just make science more effective and efficient. Um, at the end of the day, most of science is taxpayer funded. So therefore, I'm a big advocate for we have to show that return of investment. So whatever, in terms of policies that will make scientists better scientists, is what we're after there. But from a personal perspective, I've worked with offices of different lawmakers and just trying to develop different health insurance policies to promote this idea of corporal wellness. That, hey, exercise is super expensive, or exercise is super effective, health insurance is super expensive. How can we decrease some of the hurdles of the average person to get them to exercise? So there's a lot of policy stuff that can go along with that as well.
Hmm. What do you feel like personally is the biggest hurdle that we should address first as a society, or as a maybe as a body of health and science? I mean, I have my own thoughts as a clinician, but you're on the other end of the spectrum as the researcher, so curious to get your thoughts.
I think time's number one. When you talk um, to a working adult, works 9 to 5, throw a couple kids in there, throw a house and housing projects that are involved in that. It's like, all right, cool. Where am I going to squeeze that 30 minutes to an hour in?
Right. So, how do you, if you were to, work, let's say, or maybe just have the conversation with somebody one on one outside of a work setting? I mean, is that something that comes up in your daily life much, where you have conversations with people who ask, hey, how do you possibly fit in your exercise? I mean, you personally are also active, 3 kids. How do you do it? Do you have suggestions or tips for people?
Yeah, I think you got to give up something, and obviously, hopefully, I shouldn't say obviously, but hopefully, it's not going to be your kids. Hopefully, it's not going to be your family
Hmm.
that you're going to give up. But you know, can you make it into a hobby, right? So maybe instead of going to grab drinks with your friends, or playing cards with your friends, 3 times a week, you don't have to like go for walks together, but like, can you golf instead? Can you, yeah. And I'm a runner, so my friends are runners, so when we hang out, we run together.
Hmm.
It's just ways that you can kind of be yeah, efficient and intentional.
Hmm. And consistent, I would imagine too.
Yep.
It sounds like you're saying, and I think fits well with recent research that you published too, which I was skimming over as well. The effects of even only one day of inactivity,
Yeah.
correct? Which I think is a fascinating topic to address as well, because many people that I've talked to or work with may feel like, well, I exercise once a week, or um, I was active last month, so this month I can relax a little bit, that kind of thing. And we rationalize as humans, but your research is showing that you need to be consistent,
Uh-huh.
right? So what would you say is in your mind the most fascinating part of we'll pick muscle tissue because we
Yeah.
touched on that, and that's something that I stress a lot in the clinic too. in a positive adaptation that many people are surprised by. Like, for example, am always very happy to talk to people about there's not really functionally an age limit where you can possibly, gain hypertrophy, assuming you're relatively untrained.
Hmm.
And it's an extremely dynamic tissue. So, I mean, from the researcher perspective, is there some message that you would hope people can appreciate about muscle or about their ability to adapt to exercise that's maybe less commonly known?
Yeah, I guess my mind goes two different ways. One, kind of like what you're seeing with the research that we did. Muscle likes to move and likes to pretty much always move.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we showed that if you have one day of taking less than 5,000 steps, which is kind of relatively inactive, but unfortunately it's pretty common with the society we live in today. We engineered physical activity away from our day-to-day lives as now we just sit behind desks. Um, and even with exercise, it appears that the muscle still gets a little ticked off if it's not moving.
Mm-hmm.
So the muscle likes to move, and you can't exercise your way out of it. So you can't, sit around all day and then go and work out and say, well, I still got the workout in. It appears it doesn't work that way. So I think that's super fascinating. Um, it's truly, if you don't use it, you lose it, and it's very quickly. The other thing that I think is just super cool, I kind of alluded to this earlier, is just this concept that when you exercise the muscle, it's not just the muscle that's gaining benefits. Like the muscle, the same, it can produce these proteins, it can produce these metabolites that get sent into the blood. Once it's in the blood, it goes everywhere. Um, so when we look at exercise in Alzheimer's disease, that exercise, can um, minimize or decrease your Alzheimer's disease risk. What's the link there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, exercise, or if the muscle is exercising, releases these proteins, these metabolites, goes in circulation, goes up to the brain. And the opposite can happen too. If the muscle gets super ticked off because you're inactive, it can become inflammatory, or you mentioned aging. The muscle can get kind of start to develop this more pro-inflammatory state. Well, that goes into the blood. Now, all of a sudden, you have a pro-systemic inflammatory state. So that's going to affect every tissue in the body. So just kind of that role that the muscle has, not just moving, but it's not to get too sciencey, but it's an endocrine organ.
Mm-hmm.
It can really speak to all of our tissues. So we got to keep it moving.
No, please get as sciencey as you can. I mean, this is really the point of the podcast is to try to bridge the gap between the research and the nuts and bolts, if you will, and more the practical application
Yeah.
to the everyday person. For me, I think one of the most fascinating topics you touched on is the idea of intensity, right? Not just that you use it, you lose it, but how you use it, I think, is also critical.
Yep.
And certain degrees of intensity will create different kinds of adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this with folks clinically all the time too. They may feel like, well, I'm exercising or I'm putting the work in. Why am I not getting the results?
Yep.
Let's pick muscle, for example. From a researcher's perspective, what kinds of variables should we be paying attention to as far as intensity if we want certain kinds of adaptation, whether that's strength or mass gain or endurance? I mean, from a practical perspective, what would you encourage people to actually focus on in their training?
Yeah. So from a practical perspective, my first answer is whatever you like to do,
I like.
Right? At the end of the day, I tell students this all the time. You can write the perfect scientific exercise prescription plan, but if the person's not doing it, it's useless. So whatever you like to do, as long as it is exercise, do it. But otherwise, I don't, this is not to, be an old man get off my lawn type approach here, but this is something that I think as exercise scientists, um, we can do better at is communication. So I'll kind of get back to your answer there, but I say that we've overcomplicated things, I think, a lot. I've heard this anecdotally from people that they get too confused. Well, I hear that, this type of exercise is good for you. I hear that this one's, the best for you, and this one, and you get too confused, right? And then that can lead to, Whenever somebody has confusion, that means they don't want to do it anymore. They're
Mhm.
just like, whatever. You guys can't agree on anything. But honestly, the basics will get you 95% of the way there. You throw in, those 4 to 5 days a week of aerobic exercise where, you can, in my perfect world, you've got, maybe 2 days where it's conversational. But as you said, I think intensity is extremely important, particularly as you get older. So you throw in some of those intensity days where some, again, doesn't have to be super fancy, but push yourself to the point for maybe 2 or 3 minutes where, you can't talk anymore, then go back to conversational.
Mhm.
See that a couple times. And then resistance train, resistance train, again, doesn't have to be super fancy. We can get there, we can build up to that, but just get in the gym, just grab some weights. So I was talking to somebody the other day. Just go to the gym, just do some machines until you can't do anymore.
Mhm.
Go get some water, do it again. It's like it doesn't have to be all that difficult because I think that can get us like 90% of the way there. And
Right.
then I personally feel like then the individual has some ownership, can gain some confidence, and then I'm gonna start to introduce like, all right, now let's tweak some of the intervals. Let's, now again the sciencey uh, mind can kick in of, okay, let's tweak some of these intervals because I want to, maximize your, anaerobic pathway to, do X, Y, and Z, or, can think of fiber type, recruitment, explosiveness, things like that. But yeah, the basics, American College of Sports Medicine, aerobic exercise, 4 to 5 days a week, build some days moderate, some days vigorous, resistance train 2 to 3 times a week. You'll be pretty good from
I,
there.
I want to clarify for our audience that this is not scripted, but a lot of what you're saying is the same kind of message I try to portray. But it means a lot more hearing from somebody with a PhD than a DPT at times. So, but I love sticking to the basics. I think that's super critical, especially with, as you mentioned, how confusing of a society we have. I'm curious to get a researcher's perspective on that. Like, how do we break through that noise? Like social media, I talk about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole division of the internet that is totally dedicated to like the fitness influencer, let's say, and so much information that is either completely outright lie or it's just skewed to the point where it's not practical. But how do you feel like the truly good, practical information that is time tested and will actually work? How do we break through all the noise to get to people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and if you know the answer, please jump in because I I
Still
haven't
working on it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't quite solved that one yet. Um, I guess to me, one of the things is just kind of these. Um, I think the podcast world has done a great job of over the last like 2 or 3 years is kind of the more long format, like what we're doing now, just conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not scripted. Um, we can just dialogue, right? You can challenge me. I've heard that a lot in the exercise world more as of late, and I think that is great. Rather than these 15-minute sound bits where I'm just going to hammer you and like not open the space for challenge. I think that's a great first step. Um, Also, I think what I personally do when I consume like podcasts and things like that, um, I know the platform or the person who's leading it, not personally, but I know of them or I know the organization. So okay, so American College of Sports Medicine is leading this. They're not a private entity. They're not, there to make money. They're there to promote science and promote health.
Mm-hmm.
So great. That's where I'm gonna listen then. Or and I guess this is easy for me to say, but I know who a lot of the solid researchers are. Um, that I can think, well, if you ever want to listen about protein consumption or muscle hypertrophy, I know these are the three people who are the leaders in the field. go to them. So that's easy for me to say, but in terms of just the average person of where to consume the information, honestly, if I always cringe a bit when I hear things that are way out of left field. Um, if you kind of steer away from the basics as what we are just talking about, like that just immediately turns me off because like, well, why are you saying that? Is it because you're it's clickbait? You know, you're just looking for more clicks. Yeah, that's kind of where my mind is at. But I mean, that is a great. That to me is an issue that keeps me up at night for sure. Yeah, is how are we developing our message?
Well, in this instant gratification society we have, so many people they want the answers faster, it seems. We want the solution faster, certainly. And in a world where, it's the next scroll is going to be, whatever I absorb and believe, a lot of times it boils down to, quite frankly, just how articulate are you? Or in the health and fitness space, how good do you look, really, right? If I have a six pack and I say something, compared to if I don't, or if I have my shirt on, probably going to be more effective, at least to gain views, just if I look the part.
Yeah.
But the other piece I think is that I want to touch on too is because you mentioned confusion before and how confusing health and fitness can be for so many people is the idea of all of the technology and all the information we have nowadays. I go to wearables, wearable devices, not to call it any specific brands, but just your thoughts in general on, do you feel like they have been a net positive for our health and fitness, or do you feel like because of how much they've diluted truth and accuracy to an extent that maybe they are steering people away from the right path? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that positive, and I say that because right now, I'm there. I think there's a caveat there. I think net positive because more people are paying attention to how much they actually move. So if you have an Apple Watch and you want to go to bed at night with your rings filled in or completed, um, I'll even throw myself in this camp. There's some times where it's like, oh, I got like 30 more calories going to burn. I got to quick do some jumping jacks. But people do that, and it's great, right? So, or maybe, man, this happens all the time in academia. I only walk like 3,000 steps today, and it's like 5 p.m. I got to do something, right? So it brings some awareness. So that's why I think it's a net positive because I think people are again buying into their health because they now see the data in front of them. My caveat, though, is I am concerned we're starting to be at the tipping point, and that now we're starting to get somewhat too wrapped up in it. I was talking with a cross-country coach the other day who is having his athletes for the first time stop wearing GPS watches because we're starting to just lose that like intrinsic feel of just being aware to your body. Who cares what your whatever recovery score is? Like, do you feel recovered? There's your answer. So we're starting to lose our ability to, think intrinsically. If my whatever device I'm wearing says I'm recovered, but I feel like garbage, who are you going to believe more? So I think overall net positive, but I'm worried we're starting to get maybe a little too addicted to wearables, and we're starting to lose a little bit of our intrinsic feel of how do you feel.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that I kind of think of the comparison between these fitness wearables and technology and social media, where initially I think the intent was good, right?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I didn't think of that.
It's there to be a helpful tool, helpful resource, but then over time it starts to divulge or divert, I should say, into something that maybe it's not intended to, and depending on how wrapped up somebody is in that world or in that context, it can be harmful. And ironically, a lot of fitness devices are now integrating with social media, and so you can compete with your friends and see who's the healthiest, right? Which, for the competitive person, I think it's great. Hopefully, for the non-competitive person, you don't take it the wrong way and think, "Oh, I'm not as good." Like, use it as a motivational piece.
Yeah. Yep.
but yeah, I think it's always a tough conversation to tell people, okay, this device that you're wearing is, while it has high tech, it may not be the most appropriate or even better than just what you were born with, your functioning nervous system.
Hmm.
So skipping ahead then a little bit, what do you feel like are some of the missing gaps right now that we should, or that you would like to address, like as an exercise science or exercise physiology world? Not necessarily long-term goals, but like the next big project or next gap in our understanding of exercise and fitness. What do you feel like that is?
Yeah, so kind of coming back to what we mentioned earlier, this concept of physical inactivity on the exercise response. So that's something I've really gotten into the last handful of years. As as a society, again, becoming more and more sedentary, I think we used to think that, well, if you work out, you're gonna counteract that. But again, we're seeing that's not quite the case. So um, what I would love to see, which I'm going back to, I mentioned I like politics here. What I would love to see is us to develop a better concept of looking at exercise as an investment. So yeah, I study a lot with aging. I mean, we published in 2020, yeah, 2020, it was part of my, no, 2019, it was in my dissertation, that people who exercise throughout their lives were on about 1 to 2 medications. The average person, yeah, and these were people in their 70s. The average were 5 to 8 at the time, and now it's 10 plus.
Wow.
So the people who are exercising throughout their life, right, they're taking time out of their day, roughly, 4 hours a week. Well, look at what that got them at the end of their life. One, they're just functionally a lot better. But let's look at it from a societal perspective. Yeah, think of it as an investment, right? Look at how expensive medications are. Look at how you feel after taking a lot of medication. There's a lot of side effects. What you did in your 20s is influencing what the next 50 years are going to look like for you. So it'd be great to kind of wrap up into this rather, okay, it's nice that you got to exercise today. That's cute, that's nice. What does that mean for you in 50 years from now? Like that kind of concept of exercise as an investment. I would love to move to a world as well where, in the United States, a lot of our health insurance comes through our employers. Health insurance premiums are really high. Well, if I, as an employer, am paying that, what if instead of paying that, I pay the person to exercise? Now, all of a sudden, in theory, we could decrease health insurance costs because I have healthier employees. These employees are happier. These employees are more productive. And now I'm paying less in health insurance costs because they're on 10 less medications. So just kind of thinking of exercise rather than, strict fitness. Yeah, it's nice you got to exercise today. I'd love for us to be thinking of it more as what are the societal impacts of exercise? Because I think it's huge. Um, with aging, aging demographics are changing quite a bit now that the average age is going up. Health insurance rates are going up. I think exercise can be a great tool to help with that.
And it really comes down to changing the incentive structure, as you said, and, not just from the employer perspective, but also from the employee and just people in general, right? What is your motivation for putting in this time? And as you perfectly outlined, it's so that when you are in your 70s, 80s, you're not the one that has to take 10 medications daily, and that investment pays off. Just like for money, though, it's hard to convince people who are young and who are maybe not acutely sick or injured that there's going to be benefits to it. You may not realize it, though. Just like, when you're 20, you don't want to deposit into a Roth or 401k. You want to go out to the bar or whatever. But it pays huge dividends decades later when you need it the most.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, to hear from your perspective on the research side, that's critical too. But I also want to respect your time. We're getting close to about our cap here. I know you're busy this afternoon. So any research that we can expect in the works from you or your team that you're okay with disclosing?
Yeah,
Or is it a
absolutely.
surprise?
No, we've got some data that's currently being analyzed at Medical College Wisconsin. Literally any day I can be getting an email with that beautiful email with 30 different spreadsheets on the effects of being inactive on some of the plasma um, proteins and metabolites, and how does exercise and inactivity affects the plasma. And what's really exciting about that, we published, recently on looking at within the muscle. What's cool about plasma is that, just like what I said earlier, muscle can dump out a lot of these proteins, these metabolisms into the blood. Other tissues can do the same thing. So when we collect plasma, it's like, okay, this is again the blood that's going to your brain, the blood that's going to your liver, the blood that's going to your kidneys. Um, so how is inactivity or how is exercise affecting what is going to all these different tissues?
Mhm.
So said I should be getting that email literally any day. Goal is to publish it by the end of the year.
Very cool. Well, fingers crossed it comes quickly, and looking forward to reading it once it's published. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for all of your contributions, not just to Concordia, but to the body of literature that we all access and benefit from. And really appreciate your time and looking forward to everything in the future you develop.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Peace, everybody. Thanks for watching.